we want. And we gathered this morning on one of the aspects of the transformation that we want to see, skills that empower our people to have cool opportunities in the just transition and ecological transformation. We will have a session of about 50 minutes. And it's the moment of the day in which, of course, you are welcome to listen to us while you're taking your kids to school or while you're having breakfast at home. We are having a coffee here at the FEPS offices, and we hope that you can start the day as we do, with good coffee and a good mood. FEPS Cup this morning says anything is possible. So with this positive attitude, I'm very glad to welcome Aline Conchon, Senior Policy Advisor at Industrial Europe, and Stellina Gatzikristou, that is an expert and leading the work of Cedefop on exactly the topic that we are addressing today, skills for the green transition. I'm not going to give a big introduction because we all know how relevant is the topic, how pervasive have to be the ecological transition impacting all sectors. And it is by now rather clear that even if we don't know exactly how many jobs will be created and how many jobs will be distracted, it is sure that there will be a problem, that some sectors and some regions, some type of worker will suffer a lot, and we need to manage the employment transitions. So to facilitate the fact that new employment is possible, we gathered today with you two great experts to provide not only a state of the art, but also some input on the way to go. So without further ado, I give you the floor to Stellina for a presentation by Cedefop, and then we gather back for a comment and a presentation by Aline. Stellina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you see my presentation? Excellent. So good morning from me as well. My name is Stellina Gatzikristou. I'm an expert in Cedefop, working on skills and labor market. I would like to thank FEPS for the invitation to discuss our work and our view regarding this very important and interesting megatrend. So Cedefop has been exploring the impact of environmental policies on employment and skills for over a decade. But since the implementation of since the adoption of the European Green Deal by the European Commission, we have shifted our efforts to understand the implications of the new growth strategy of the EU on employment skills, and therefore on vocational education and training, which is the core aspect of work of Cedefop. We truly believe that VET, vocational education and training, and continuous can enable people's transitions to a more circular economy, to a greener state of things. And it is a very important part of the solutions, policy solutions and personal decisions in order to make the transition happen. So we have been exploring now the implications, as I said, of the EGD in order to understand the impact on occupations and sectors, because the green transition, we refer to as transition, but it's not only, let's say, the journey from today to a more circular economy. It's also a new paradigm of how we will do things on economic and social scale. So we really need to understand and try to find the better ways forward in order to make this transition happen, but also the adoption of a more circular green way of living and acting in the long term. In order to do so, the approach we have in Cedefop is that of skills intelligence, and that penetrates, of course, our work not only about the green transition, which means that the complexity of the phenomenon demands that we collect both quantitative and qualitative information and blend them together in order to better understand the trends and developments for the EU level member states, but also sectors and regions and even the local level. So we draw valuable information from a unique set of tools such as the the EU Skills Forecast and our Ovate, Skills Ovate platform, which draws information from online job advertisements and allows us to understand more in a more real-time approach what are the demands of employers. However, at the same time, we saw the importance of understanding the trends at the sectoral level. We ran a specific dedicated skills forecast scenario, as I will show here some key results, in order to understand what would be the implications of achieving most of the EGD goals in 2030, what would be the implications on sectors and occupations? And there we found that, as highlighted earlier by David, but also, of course, but by several policy documents and research, that it's not going to be the same story for all sectors. We see, of course, a tendency from more, let's say, brown, sectors that have more polluting aspects to sectors that can drive the green transition, specifically, for example, waste management and construction that is part of the renovation wave. What is important to see here and in other results that we have by occupational, by types of occupation, is first of all that the green transition overall means opportunities for all sectors and all types of occupations. So we will need more engineers, we will need more managers, but we will also need significantly more skills and more people at medium level and even elementary level of skills. This depends on the sector and creates, of course, different types of implications for policies. So what is important to understand is that it's a people-centered change. So the upskilling and reskilling of adults, which instead of, we hope that it will become the norm, it will be available for all, is necessary. Continuous vet, as we call it, should become, and I think it has already been accepted as one of the most powerful weapons in policymakers' arsenal. What is an important outcome of our work from the sector, from the skills foresight, is the fact that we could identify some, if I may say, categories of occupations in relation to the green transition. So the change is relevant for all occupations. So everybody, we should learn about more sustainable approaches, about attitudes, about why it's important and how through our work we can make a small change. There are some occupations that are expectedly more, let's say, central to the green transition, such as a solar panel technician, an electric vehicle engineer, designer, etc. But at the same time, we identified a shift and the importance of some occupations that may be very small in employment shares, but detrimental to make the transition happen. This is why we call them thyroid occupations. We cannot do without them, although they're small. For example, researchers on specific technologies that are very, very central to make the green transition happen. And we see again from our results and also our qualitative research that the transitions mean that some people may need to change sectors, but also may need that they change occupations. At the same time, there are sectors such as the waste management that is expected to grow, to have significant employment growth, that will need to attract people at all levels of skills. So there's also importance to discuss and identify solutions also in terms of attracting young people or attracting new entrants overall into sectors that will make a difference for attaining the EGD goals. In order, as I said, to understand better the trends, we also explored the qualitative approaches. So we ran a sectoral skills foresight because the sectoral element is very, very important in order to understand the implications and provides approaches that would actually make a difference. We selected sectors that have been found through our work, but also through other policy research that are important for making the transition happen. And we focus our work on waste management, agri-food, circular economy, but also smart and green cities, which is not a sector per se. However, they reflect the, first of all, the twin transition. We see it from our work, and of course, you've heard it from other sources, that digitalization, automation, and the greening of economy go hand by hand. And we see also this as a reflection to the skills identification. And at the same time, exploring what's going on at the city level also allows us to understand the importance of the local level also for the green transition. It is the sectoral level of importance, but also the local level, because the same sector may have different needs in different regions, particularly in larger countries or in regions where they are strongly linked economically and employment-wise to specific sectors. I welcome you to, of course, explore the results of this first exercise that is already online. In my view, what is important to highlight is that experts stress the importance of vocational education and training, as it is reflected, of course, in the new skills agenda, and also the council recommendation, the Osnabrück declaration, and of course, Cedefop's work. And another point that we see already as cutting across the different sectors is the importance of citizen engagement. So a possible type of skill and type of job that will be necessary in various sectors, it will be one that will have to do with making the public or the clientele, depends on the sector, aware of how the green transition matters, of how it impacts their lives, their attitudes as consumers, and ensuring that they are also engaged in these changes. So we see, I think, clearly that the role of VET is both for the short term. We need to act fast because change already is taking place, and it's not only important to make the transition, but to make a just transition. It is one of the pillars, of course, of the European Green Deal, and highly stressed by the European Commission through various actions. But at the same time, we need to plan and foresee and discuss how we will make it to the long term, to the new shift of paradigm. So let's call it a marathon. It's a different type of training in real life. So in policy terms, it demands a bit of different type of approaches, but they need to take place at the same time. And our work in Cedefop envisages and hopes to support the European Commission and the member states highlight the necessary steps both for the sprint and the marathon. Our work for the future will focus on better understanding developments at the member state level, at the employers' demand in specific skills, as I said, through skills survey, but also through our sectoral skills foresights. Specifically about types of VET, we are exploring through our various work what would be the necessary forms. Apologies, because the format of vocational education and training should also be adjusted to the needs of the learner, to the specific needs of the topic discussed. So particularly for apprenticeships, which is a powerful tool in our view, and Cedefop has done a lot of work on the topic and continues to do so. We have a community of apprenticeship experts, and we collect evidence from that. Last but not least, to say that it is, although there is a lot of discussions, etc., there's still no universally accepted taxonomy or classification of what the important skills are. We call them skills for the green transition because we want to imply and highlight that there is no one unique list that applies to everyone. We see more and more from our work, whether quantitative or qualitative, that there are some skills that should be broadly provided to all types of occupations and all types of jobs and all citizens, I would say. There are specific skills, more technical, job relevant to specific occupations. They are more prominent in those that are in the front line, if we can say, of the green transition. But at the same time, there are some more transversal ones that, according to experts, we hear more and more that it would be important to various types of occupation, whether this is adaptability, whether there is understanding of concepts like circularity, etc. There's significant work taking place and has taken place on understanding taxonomies and classification. For example, the Green Com by the JRC and the Commission's ESCO has done specific work on green terms that is available online. From our side, building on the valuable input we have from our Skills of Aid from online job advertisements, we are working on understanding what are the terms, that the green terms, if I may say, that are being used in job advertisements in order to link them to specific skills and expectations. So there is a lot of work taking place in this field. More and more knowledge is coming along, but at the same time, it's such a dynamic field that these efforts need to be updated continuously, always in communication with the relevant stakeholders. I also welcome you to check the work done by Cedefop for the coronavirus crisis, which has shaped, of course, in a very brief time, the labor market, and it can be expected that some of these changes will remain and therefore should be reflected in decisions relevant to the green transition and employment. Thank you very, very much. I'm available, of course, for questions or any emails after the.
Thank you, Stelina, actually, for this nice
very fast.
nice overview. You have been fast, but in complete almost, because you have been able to give a nice picture of something that we can expect in different sectors. And I revert to Aline with I would say a relatively big question that I hope you can help us respond. We have also tried to look at the impact on jobs through the circular economy in a book with Yanis Brigats and Said El Kadrawi. Recently at FEPS, and somehow the aggregate numbers are a little bit worrying, because from one side the European Green Deal is true, it's likely to create over 2 million new jobs. We've heard from Stelina in specific sector like recycling, building renovations, renewable energy, even sustainable mobility and transports. But at the same time, plenty of other jobs in more extractive sector or energy-intensive sectors, as much as maybe 10 million jobs, are perhaps at risks. So it is clear that vocational education and training and education and skills agenda alone cannot save us. They cannot deliver on the just transition. So we need plenty of other measures, starting from forward-looking industrial policy, investment policy. But in terms of that, in terms of adult skills, what do you think is the real priority? How do you think we should move in order to make the transition as smooth as possible and more, let me say, sexy for the workers?
Good morning to all. Thanks, David. And I also have to address a big thanks to Stelina, that just made my life so much easier, because there's a lot in the work of Cedefop that is indeed supporting all our thinking and also our trade union strategy to embrace a just transition. David, you can't be more right. Our key concern for the trade union movement is to make sure that we manage a job-to-job transition, meaning that what we want to avoid is that the changes that we're going to see, and that's indeed in all sectors, so it's not just the energy sector or that has to go more green and support the transition, it's not just the automotive or steel sector that suddenly have to reshift their model. It's every single sector of our economies that are impacted by the decarbonization and green transition. And we want to make sure that it doesn't go by losing your job, getting to unemployment, getting skills, reskills, and then finding a new job. What we want to make sure is that indeed the workers are not losing and that no one is left behind during the transition. Maybe to specify a bit more the position of Industrial Europe. So Industrial Europe, we are the European Trade Union Organization that represent the workers in manufacturing, industry, energy, and mining sectors. So we do represent 7 million working men and women across Europe, that's 38 countries. And we do so thanks to our affiliated trade unions. So we have 180 trade unions around Europe. And when I say we do represent and we have a very clear set of demand for proper framework for just transition and job-to-job transition that is based on years of experience of trade unions in supporting those kind of transition. Stelina made the point really at the start of the presentation saying, well, it's not all new. Even when we talk about VET, continuous and initial VET, it's been a point and demands for decades for trade unions, but also actually from employer association to say that is work-based learning that we need if we want indeed to make sure that we end up in situation where workers are equipped with the proper skills that are needed on the labor market. So this and upskilling exercise is not something new. We've been working on this for years. We had the digital transition before. So we had the automation revolution in the 70s. We know the recipe for reskilling and upskilling. The green skills also, Stelina mentioned what is called now the green skills. Also, they're not new. It's not like energy management or waste management started as a being a key skills only 2 or 5 years ago. It's been there for a long time. Our challenge nowadays and what is new is the pace and the scale of the change. And David, you did mention numbers. We're talking about millions of jobs that can be impacted, millions of jobs created and millions of jobs being transformed or displaced. The good news is, from our decade of experience with reskilling, upskilling, VET, we have the recipe. So we know which instrument we can use and we have learned our lessons. And what I would like to share with you this morning is maybe let's say 4 main lessons that are very important for us to bear in mind. The first lesson is take a comprehensive approach, meaning that when you think about green transition, you will be wrong if you only think about green skills. David, you did have a point. We have to think about the fact that we want to train people to reskill and upskill, but that is not for training people for getting low quality job in dying industries. So we first have to tackle the very first bottom issue, which is what is it that we want for? What is the kind of industry we want in the future? What is the kind of sectors that is going to contribute to decarbonization? We also have to take a comprehensive approach because when you talk about green skills, for instance, we always have a small warning to say, careful. Of course, we have to train for the new green skills, which are very specific. Stelina mentioned, for instance, this thyroid job like hydrogen researcher. Yes, we're going to need more of them, but we still need basic elementary scientific skills, technical skills, transversal skills. You need to know how to work in teams. You need to have critical thinking. You have to have some problem solving abilities. Here, for instance, you do have some instrument at European level. You do have recommendation from the Council on key competencies for lifelong learning, where they say, well, I mean, you even have to learn how to learn. I mean, that's also kind of a very basic skills that we have to start with. So in this green transition and talking about green skills, you have indeed to enlarge your perspective and think broader. It's not just about green skills. As I mentioned, and this is maybe it, so first, think broader. Be careful of just having this narrow perspective on green skills. Second lesson we learned is think strategic. Industrial policy, David, you mentioned it. That's maybe where we have to start. If we want to know, because you have to take it in a kind of chronological order almost. When you do decide, I'm going to take a training on that skills, that is because you've been, you hopefully got guidance on which training can make sense, and you got guidance because we know where your industry or your company is going to develop to. And you know that because maybe there is a strategy for your sector on where it's going to be in 5 years' time. So it's almost like reskilling and upskilling is at the end of the process. You first have to start with some strategy about the industrial policy you need. And Stelina, thanks so much for having stressed out that this thinking, the strategy for your sector, means that indeed you have to have this granular strategy. You have to look sector per sector, and again, all sector. We all have in mind, for instance, the energy intensive industry. Certainly now that we are in the middle of this energy price crisis, we have to look at the future development of the energy sector, but again, we have to look at all the sectors that have to contribute to decarbonization. The goal of the European Green Deal are so ambitious that every single sector, again, is going to need to contribute. So we have to look at sectors, but Stelina put it really right, at regions, at local level as well. Ultimately, the just transition is going to happen at the shop floor, in factories, in offices, where at the workplace. And the situation is so much different from one region to another, from one local situation to another, and one sector. And that is where we so much welcome the work that Cedefop is doing. And I have to stress, Stelina did not pay me this morning for blessing so much the work of Cedefop, but really, when something is useful and so helpful, we have to stress it. Anticipation of skills needs is key. Skill intelligence, forecasting skill needs is key by sector, local, regional level. So the work of Cedefop is developing is of tremendous help. We just can't work out the green transition by looking at the aggregate data about these million of jobs. We have to have a better strategic understanding. So again, first lesson, have this broad approach, not just green skills. Second, think strategically. You have to know where you go. And the third lesson, act now. And that's where I come with you to your question, David. VET, again, VET, we know where are the loopholes. We know where are the difficulties. We still have so few adult learning, so few adult workers going on training. Lifelong learning is still not something that is in the DNA of our companies, workplaces all around Europe. That's also because we need some reform. Good news is some reforms are being undertaken in many European countries nowadays, starting quite often with finally granting an individual right to training. And I'm talking about an individual right to training, not an entitlement like an individual learning account, which is a great support and instrument, but doesn't solve the issue of we have to make sure that it's not always the same people going on training all over their career. We have to think about the low-skills workers, the precarious workers, the workers on non-standard employment, the young workers, the women workers, the senior workers also, those who maybe had a very terrific experience at school and are very reluctant to go on training again. So we have to put the change in place now, step up VET now, and that is funding that we need, that right to training that we need. And that means that the EU instruments we have, like Council recommendation, they have to be implemented. The recommendations are non-binding. We need them to be implemented by member states.
Thank you, Aline. I stop you here because I want to connect with one question that we received from Pavlina. You mentioned act now. And I think, sorry, Pavlina, I partly reinterpret your question, but the act now connects a little bit with the fact that the European Commission has tried to act and has put adult learning at the core of the action plan for the implementation of the European social pillar, with a rather ambitious target of achieving the 60% of adult in training by 2030. So there is somehow an ambition and a target there are, as you mentioned, recommendations that try to go in this direction. And the question actually stresses and asks the two of you how the action plan can help deliver on this, and up to which extent it is needed to leverage, involve small and medium enterprises in all these transformation and adult skills. So what is the way to deliver and to involve people that are not working for big companies or multinationals, and maybe they are not in somehow in high level training organizations. I don't know if you want to start maybe on the action plan and on SMEs. Aline, I'll give the floor to you, and then to Stelina.
Well, thank you for the question, because then it really helps me also to stress this maybe fourth, in that case, main lesson we learn is that the implementation, it has to take place at all levels. So any EU initiative, because of the pace and scale of the challenges, is welcome, of course. But the implementation is going to be on the ground. So we need to have action plan at all levels. So EU level is fine, but if you don't have national member states, again, going on reform, I mentioned this individual right to training, paid educational leave, it won't work. And even if you have national member states taking action, you also have to have regions taking action, and you have to have companies taking action. So we have to make sure, and this is also my plea for this comprehensive approach, that we just don't delegate all responsibility, hope, and expectation to just one level. The tool for implementation, that's what is something we learn works, social dialogue. And social dialogue means agreement in companies. At Industrial Europe, for instance, we did sign a European agreement on anticipation of skills needs, skill forecast, training policies, because of the digital and green transition with the multinational company Safran. And thanks to this very tailored to the company needs approach with an agreement and the involvement of all actors at local level, meaning workers, their trade unions, and even their HR managers, that's a way to have implementation that go through down the lines. As you say, we need to have workers on board. We have to make sure we have a narrative that is not you go on training or you're going to lose your job. We have to make sure we incentivize, and we can do so by this social dialogue. And if you complement social dialogue with collective bargaining, at sectoral level, this is where you can help SMEs. We have the experience, so we have nowadays quite a number of trade unions in different countries, France, Italy, Sweden, that are negotiating with employer association agreement on upskilling, reskilling, vocational education and training on the sector. And those agreements are opening up possibilities, could be also observatories for skills of the future in a sector, that could be pooling resources for Center of Vocational Excellence, for pooling resources for having joint trade union training center that SMEs can benefit from, because indeed we do acknowledge there is a specific issue for the SMEs.
Thank you, Aline. A comment from you, Stelina?
Thank you. I'm not an expert in SMEs engagement per se, because this can be quite particular. I agree with Aline's intervention in the fact that all types of policies and plans should be adjusted to the sizes and the needs of companies. And it's not a cliche. I mean, it's heard a lot, but it's true that SMEs are the backbone of most European sectors. Larger companies play a very important role, but at the same time, we need to consider SMEs, particularly, if I may say, micro companies in some sectors, because let's say a medium-sized enterprise in a large country like Germany or France is a very different story than a micro company, which is usually a family company, owned and managed company in a smaller country. So even SMEs should not be treated when we try to see the specifics as an absolute whole. I think what is important to keep in mind also is the importance of the value chains. So there are many SMEs that provide very important materials, particles of a larger value chain that is impacted in different ways from the green transition in other transitions. I mean, Aline highlighted this. I hope I also did that. We shouldn't take the green transition in a silo. I mean, other megatrends take place at the same time. So a very useful perspective when designing sectoral approaches or local approaches, national approaches, I think this is already reflected in efforts by the Commission, is the fact that the whole value chain should be taken into consideration. So maybe we are producing particle A, but if this is, for example, I'm saying something that relates to the automotive industry, then the other parts of the wider value chain should be taken into consideration, because in one way or another, it's not only the pace that Aline highlighted, it's the essence of the change. It's like water, it penetrates, which means it can be very useful, it can be life, but if we don't manage well, it can be a problem. And at the same time, I would say that specifically for the micro companies, it's not only the financial means that I think more or less can be made available. There are various options available at the EU level that also go down to the national and local levels. It's also a matter of raising awareness and engagement, because the issues that these people face at the everyday life may be very, very different from even medium-sized companies. And there, in my humble opinion, would be that it's the role, let's say, of sectoral associations, of chambers of commerce or other types of such organizations is vital. And I know very good examples that they are doing a great job in increasing awareness and attracting people to offer training.
Here at FEPS, in collaboration with the Jacques Delors Institute in Paris, we have been working on adult skills, the adult skills agenda, and in a publication called Towards an Individual Right to Adult Learning for All Europeans, we have reviewed and revised different national measures and some of the statistics that goes in the direction of what Aline, you mentioned also in advance right a few minutes ago, the difficulty to arrive with vocational training to those that need it a little bit more. For instance, high skills, they have a participation rate of over 55%. Low skill, it's below 20%. Managers, 2/3 of the managers, they are engaged in some training. Instead, those with elementary occupation is at best 1/3. And as well, if you are employed, about 50% of the employed, they get some training. If you are unemployed, it's below 25%. So the difficulty is how to arrive there. The other striking result on which I would like to ask you a comment is that we've seen that over about 80% of the people don't engage in adult learning because they think they don't need it. And it's just the 20% that stress that it's not available, it's too costly, it doesn't fit with my work-life balance. It's 80% they don't think they need it. This is an aggregate, in all sectors, not specifically for the green sector. But do you find that it is easier, perhaps, given the relevance of the green transition, to deliver the idea that there are opportunities, employment opportunities that can be met if we do some training? So how can we use it, in a transformative way, in a communication way, to engage people so that we get to this 80% of people that don't think that they need adult training? I don't know who wants to start. I don't want to Aline and then Stelina. And I have to ask you to respond in maximum 1 minute and 30.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so super important, clearly, and it's not just communication, because if it's communication, this is something we've been saying for quite some long time. You have to raise awareness from the workplace. We have experience, it was for quite a long time in the UK, for instance, you have trade union shop stewards that are doing workplace information about training offer, possibility, and guidance. But this is where, and that's my 1 minute message, we need companies to play their role. You have to have strategic skills planning. You have to have career guidance. You have to raise awareness about what's going to happen. The 80% that believe they don't need it don't see where the future of the company is going to be. And that's where we need them to be involved in the discussion about the green transition. And that's where we are seeing you have to have workers on board, you involve them, you involve the trade union that represent them, you have to have social dialogue. And that's one way to raise awareness that we think is very powerful.
Thanks
for sticking to the time too, Stellina.
I'm not sure where this data come from. I would really appreciate that you send it to me. It's quite interesting. I would say again that it would be important to understand the profile of these people. I mean, 80% it's a massive majority. So I think approaches that it's not like one solution fits all may not be the best. Because it is, I think, and it's important to understand whether we are talking about what type of adults we are talking about, whether they are already in employment or not, which is the background in order to make more targeted approaches. I would agree with Aline that it's also a matter of information and understanding, because it's not only, you said it's not specifically about the green transition, this question that was posed to these people, it's overall. So we're talking about some respondents that they show aversion to learning, or they don't understand actually why they need to learn. So this is why I think it's important to understand better who these people are and go to the root. And possibly it's something that goes further back from social dialogue, which of course it's very important, and I agree, and employees need to understand. But if it's a matter of not understanding the importance of learning to learn, and accept that you will have to unlearn and learn again, as it's the very wise phrase that has been going around for some years now, then we are maybe talking about changes in educational policies, even from primary education, because it's a type of behavior, it's a type of approach to life. It's a type of, I need to not litter the street because it's part of my world, it will come back to me. It's that foundational approach that one needs to have, that you need to learn, not only to get a job, but also to be an efficient citizen. And so I think this is why it would be important to crack down this data and understand who these people are and how, in order to get a better approach, both for those that are already in employment, but also see how we could avoid the sustaining such very high shares of people that do not believe they need to be trained.
Thanks a lot, Stellina, as well. My big thanks to all those that followed the seminar this morning online, and to those that will have the pleasure and will take the time to listen to us on YouTube. Big thanks to Cedefop and to Industry All Europe. I have to remind to some of you that would like to continue to remain engaged with us on the employment we want, for the last policy breakfast meeting of the series. Of course, equal pay has to be one of the desires that we want for our labor market. And next week, on the 20th of September, where we have a morning policy discussion on gender inequalities in the labor market and how to solve them. If instead you are interested and work on skills specifically, you can re-engage with FEPS on the 30th of September. We have a meeting on the recovery watch, in which we will also discuss, among other things, how the national recovery and resilience plans are dealing with skills in the digital transition. So all information on FEP's website. Hope to see you soon again, and thanks a lot for taking the time to